Hello, everybody. We are back, and the Gators have made us sad again. They played Georgia this past weekend on Saturday. We're recording this on a Monday, November 4th. And yeah, I mean, that was Florida's biggest chance, well, more specifically, Billy Napier's biggest chance to have a real proof of concept game, have that true, for real signature victory on his resume and it just was not meant to be as they bowed out to the Dogs 34 to 20. So Topher, initial thoughts on Florida's 34-20 loss to Georgia on Saturday.
Yeah, it was everything we'd seen for the last month and a half of the season. Everything we talked about going into Kentucky, everything we talked about coming out of Tennessee, and then it just got really sad. Um, I mean, this was proof of concept. I mean, everything was going correctly. Like I kind of go back and forth on whether or not Florida would have actually won if they stayed healthy. There were some clear issues, but at the end of the day, defense was making plays, DJ was making plays. And then DJ goes down, and how many teams are going to play well on their third string quarterback? How many teams are going to play well when their safety is playing corner and their other corner is like the fourth string? Like they just ran out of guys. You know what I mean? So like it's kind of hard to even be mad at anything. You're sad because like what are you even supposed to do at that point? You know what I mean? So it's a wasted opportunity, but not by any fault of at least not like any short-term fault. Like you can't really blame Billy Napier for any like schematic or preparation things. Their guys all died, you know what I mean? Like the whole team got injured. So is what it is in a lot of ways, is pretty good if you're into moral victories. But I mean, honestly, I'm more just like sad and disappointed than anything.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's hard to have the moral victory when it's already been this bad. If this was a team like some of the Dan Mullen years where the team is looking like it's on a trajectory to go, say, 9-3, 10-2, then obviously that stings and that actually has more to do with sort of your 12-team playoff implications if there was a loss like that. But at least you can see what trajectory the team's going in. But now it's like they're 4-4. I want to say 2-3 in SEC play. Um, and it's kind of just hard to see where they go from here. And to your point about the guys going down, obviously, and we'll talk about it, all of the talk is about DJ going down and Aiden Warner having to come in. But I mean, rewatching that game this morning, I mean, if you're watching that fourth quarter defense, they were still making plays. Like, don't get me wrong, but you had guys like Derek Wingo out there playing linebacker. Like Derek Wingo, I only ever see him when he does his podcast. Like that guy does not usually get on the field, but you have to play him because you just don't really have any guys. And I think that had to do a lot with Georgia finally just kind of blowing the doors open in the end and getting those late touchdowns because Florida really just did not have a lot of guys left to play on defense. But Topher, do you want to start with the offense or the defense first?
Let's go defense because I think that's more universally positive. I think they're just good. No qualifiers, no qualms, no Linsanity runs. They're just good. The defensive line was pretty good across the board. I mean, Georgia's big and mean up front. They're not quite as dominant as they've been during the bulk of the Kirby Smart run, but they're still very good and they have good running backs. And I think they played well. It was kind of a classic Georgia offense. I would say like this is a Jake Fromm looking offense. Um, and I think Florida did well. And the cool thing that we're seeing is not only are guys playing well, guys are being stars. Like they're impacting the game. I mean, Gates was a freak on that one drive where he has the TFL and then the interception. And, they're getting pressure with blitzes and with, you know, just the front four. And Jack Pyburn, is good now, I guess. I
Oh,
mean,
that was the biggest shock to me.
I know it's what a weird timeline we're in with that, but all these things are great. Um, and I feel I really don't have anything bad to say about the defense. I mean, you can nitpick things here and there. It's frustrating to be down to your last two cornerbacks, or really your last one cornerback and Trick Bridges. Um, but like, yeah, I mean, they're just better. They're more physical. They're more focused. The scheme is working better. I think a little bit is that it's simplified, and a little bit is the guys are more comfortable and they're more prepared. Um, And like, yeah, they took advantage of a bad quarterback and they gave Florida a chance to win that game if the offense was able to move the ball.
Yeah, I mean that was honestly probably their best defensive performance of the season, just in the context of who they played against. Obviously they've had better games just in terms of how many yards they've given up or, the amount of points they allowed. Against teams like Kentucky, going back to FCS, Samford, even Tennessee on the road. But I mean, this Georgia team very well could go on and win a national championship. You can't really say that about the other teams they've played so far. Um, and for the most part, I mean, outside of the garbage time touchdown after the Aiden Warner interception that basically set them up with the first and goal, you hold them to 27 points besides that, and they kind of had Carson Beck in hell for most of the game, especially that first half. I mean, three interceptions. He just wasn't very good. Like that frankly, that's just what it was. Like those throws, some of those throws you were making, it was just, what are you doing, man? And Florida's defense capitalized it. They played really well in coverage, and they were able to capitalize off of those poor throws. And uh, I think you mentioned it either in the last pod or a couple pods ago, but their open field tackling has just gotten so much better. I mean, rewatching that game, the amount of times they were able to just slip off blockers on wide receiver screens and blow it up for a negative play or get into the backfield and force negative plays there, um, was something I have not seen from Florida in quite some time. And it was very impressive to see. And I think it kind of just points to this, bigger question of, their open field tackling has been so bad for so long, and we pointed to the strength and conditioning as just not being good enough. And, with it being improved, people have talked about how it's looking a lot better, but I'd say strength and conditioning is still a major issue because, some of it's just bad luck. Like with Graham Mertz ACL tear, that's kind of just bad luck because he, plants his foot wrong. And same with DJ, he was kind of getting tackled, but still it's the same thing where he just kind of plants his foot wrong and there's some sort of tear, something happens with his hamstring, and that's kind of more bad luck. But I mean, going into the game, they had a alarming amount of injuries to guys. And then, they finished the game and half the roster feels like it's injured. I mean, that third and fourth quarter, it felt like a guy on defense was getting hurt every play. And I think that just goes back to your strength and conditioning. And it almost makes me wonder if they're making their guys too big. Like to your point that we had earlier about their edge rushers and making them all tweeners, like are these guys just getting so big that when they like have these collisions or trying to, accelerate that it's just causing issues with injuries? That is a little conspiracy theory for me. I don't really have any evidence to back that, but I'm trying to just kind of explain to myself why they have just so many guys go down, um, in comparison to a lot of these other teams in the SEC. Um, but yeah, Topher, thoughts on any more thoughts
Yeah, I think
defensively
anytime you
or
have
to that?
an injury crisis like that, your mind immediately goes to strength and conditioning. And sometimes that is an issue. And I think it's something worth evaluating as a program, especially when you consider some of the other strength and conditioning related questions, I would say, that you alluded to with kind of the way they're trying to physically develop these guys, some of those things as well. But it's also kind of hard because, like you said, it's a little bit conspiracy theory brain. Like you can never really know when injuries are a strength conditioning issue, whether they're a player's just injury prone issue, whether they're a weird fluke incident issue. It's really hard to diagnose exactly what the root cause of injuries is. And that's something you can't really know. We none of us can really know outside of the coaching staff and the training staff, really. Um, but I definitely think it's something worth evaluating. And but again, it's something that's been worth evaluating because of the other issues as well. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, it just kind of sucks. I mean, as many will know, I'm also a big Notre Dame fan, and their season has also just been like devastated by injuries all year. I mean, lose a starting corner, lose two starting defensive ends, starting a left tackle, a bunch of other key contributors up and down the roster. And like, sometimes stuff just happens, and it's the unfortunate reality of football. Um, Florida is so close as a roster to what they actually want to be, even though we didn't really expect them to be there. But as soon as they kind of get to show it, some injuries kind of derailing it. And it's really frustrating and it's tough to say like what to do from there.
Yeah. And I think too, especially with the injuries, it really did change a lot what they had to do schematically, defensively too. Um, because you watched most of that game and they were getting pressure on Carson Beck. Like we've had so many critiques of the defensive line, especially on pass plays. Um, but they were looking good. Like they were getting to Carson Beck and they were, applying pressure. And then rewatching that drive that put Georgia up 27-20, you have that pivotal 3rd and 7 play where if you get a stop, you're gonna get the ball back, still tied 20-20, the momentum's on your side. And I'm watching that play and Florida rushed 8 guys. They literally ran engage 8. And then they had 3 guys just playing man on the 3 receivers on the play and Cormani just got caught in an island and that was a young player making a very young player mistake. So obviously, it's hard for me to blame him too much, especially putting him in that big moment just because you have so many guys down. But like I was looking at the play and they had 6 guys lined up on the defensive line and then they brought in 2 linebackers also on the blitz and I could tell one was like thinking that a tight end was going to leak out for a little check down, but he also just stayed and blocked. And so you rush 8 guys, you don't get anybody home. And Carson Beck has the time to, find, I don't remember who he threw the pass to. I want to say it was maybe Arian Smith uh, when Cormani was guarding him. But it's just tough when you're so down of guys in your secondary that you have to run engage 8 and hope that you just get one guy home and nobody does.
Yeah, I mean, Florida's an aggressive defense philosophically, but I think that's a good point. When you just kind of try and disrupt the game, I think that's a clear strategic ploy by Austin Armstrong and company, um, to use your athletic linebackers and all these guys to just try and make disruptive plays, make Carson Beck make a mistake, which he does a lot, um, to not force, guys like Cormani or out of position safeties or all these other young guys into trickier situations. Like for Cormani, it's just, hey, line up one-on-one man coverage, and hopefully they get pass rush so you're not completely cooked out there. Um, and like, it kind of is what it is. And I also think it's fair to say it's tough to blame even the front five or the 8 guys who rush the passer or the coaches for calling that because when you think game states wise, like at that point, like Florida's offense could not move the ball. They couldn't even hold on to the ball really. So Florida's defense at that point of the game has got to be exhausted. You know, it's kind of getting worn down through the course of this football game because your offense is punting it back to them so frequently, because you don't have a lot of momentum, because everyone knows you don't have DJ. So there's just like a little bit of lack of juice. And I mean, that's hard to overcome. Those kind of mental things are real, especially in college football. Um, and I think that manifests itself in things we see, those few little breaks in the armor, on plays like that where it's just a little bit off and Georgia can take advantage because Florida is so one-dimensional as a team. It's just really hard to hold up for 4 quarters.
Yeah. And it was just tough to see. I mean, I think Billy said something after the game where it was like this was the year like we really felt like we could have beaten this team. Um, and that really was their chance. Who knows how good they're going to be next year? Because they kind of just never end in churning out just these elite teams. And when you get your one chance, you got to take it. And they fell up short. And I guess, is there anything else you want to say about the defense before we move over to the offensive end? Because I think that's really where um, we want to start off positive, and the defense definitely played a really good game, but we're kind of bearing the lead here with I guess the main reason why Florida lost this game.
Yeah, it's kind of unavoidable to talk about the offense and specifically the quarterback position. And I think to preface it, I think you can't really be hard on Aiden Warner. You know what I mean? It kind of is what it, I mean, he knows the situation. He said before, even just playing a snap, playing a kneel down against Samford is kind of a dream come true for him. Like He went to Yale out of high school. He wasn't a particularly dominant high school quarterback. He's pretty much the equivalent of finding a kid on UF's campus who played high school quarterback and put him on the roster. Like he's better than that, obviously. He did go to Yale to play football, but like more or less, that's what we're talking about here. This is like if Kyle Angle had to play 2 years ago. It's a walk-on quarterback.
Real
It's not
Skylar
his
Mornwick
fault.
vibes.
Exactly. Once you get this deep into the roster, it's like you can't get mad at him for being limited against Georgia. Of course he's limited against Georgia. If he was going to be good against that level of defense, he wouldn't have gone to Yale out of high school. He wouldn't be a walk-on at Florida. Um, and the coaches know that. You saw it on how they called the game. They tried to get the run game going, but when you're running into a nine-man box, it kind of is what it is. And I honestly think Warner made some good plays at times, just kind of trying to make stuff happen in the fourth quarter. So yeah, when DJ went down, that just like you kind of just know Florida has very little chance to do something, um, because you just can't consistently throw the ball like that.
Yeah. And I mean that's the thing. Like I don't want to sit here and critique Warner and talk about how bad he was because I mean truthfully he was bad, but like you said, like what are you expecting from a third string walk-on quarterback against probably the best team on paper in the country outside of maybe two other teams? And I don't know, it was just so frustrating to watch where it's like you have this golden opportunity and like you said we don't know for sure if they win that game if DJ's in, maybe they do, maybe they still fall out because he is a freshman quarterback, um but at least you have functional quarterback play and a guy who can make big plays with DJ, and at the very least they have a quarterback who can run it with DJ. I mean, on the play he got hurt, like it was a positive play strictly just from what happened in terms of gaining yardage. Obviously, not positive because of what happened. And um, as soon as he goes down, like obviously it's a third string walk on, but he has no real dual threat ability. So then they just loaded the box and they say, hey, if you're gonna run it against us, you're gonna get 1 yard at best, and if you are going to pass it, then we're just going to come after you because you're not going to be able to escape this pocket. And even if you do get a throw off, like we know what you are. You're a third string walk on. Like we are not scared by your arm either. And so there's really only so much he can do. And so it really just felt like it was uh basically watching the inevitable the moment DJ Lagway goes down of okay, this is what's about to happen. But
Yeah, I mean, and especially it's so hard because he had so many good plays even in this game. He did the DJ Lagway thing where the in between stuff is kind of hit or miss, but he's got the deep ball. He's got one of the best deep balls in the country. He flashed it on the touchdown. He's a good enough athlete to just make plays either in the design game or out of structure with his feet. Um, and yeah, it's tricky when you're Florida to just lose that, and especially when you don't have a Graham Mertz. Like, what are you supposed to do?
yeah, because I mean that like especially when Aiden Warner came in, like the defense Georgia was playing against him was probably what would have been the defensive scheme if Graham Mertz was starting, because Graham Mertz is not really a mobile quarterback, and he's a little one-dimensional in that way, doesn't really have the deep ball in him like that, so you can kind of creep up and play closer. But the thing about Graham Mertz is like he will be highly efficient in that intermediate short game to the point of I'm not watching Aiden Warner throw a hospital ball to, was it Mizell he threw the hospital ball to and he got blown up? Like, man, I know it's a third string. I don't want to critique him, but like that ball that's got to get there quicker. He's leaving his guys out to die a little
Throwing a
bit.
bubble screen late is just like you just can't do that, man. You're gonna get guys hurt playing
Yeah.
like that.
Like I know, like I think rewatching the rep, I think Badger did not really try that much on his block, but at the same time, I think he was just like did not realize how late it would the pass would come to Mizell, and so he wasn't able to set his block in time. And it kind of just threw everything out of rhythm. And so those are the kind of things where it's like, okay, yeah, Graham Mertz is like probably not stretching the field like DJ. Like he's probably not making a throw like Lagway made when he threw that touchdown to Mizell, but like I can trust him to throw that bubble screen to Mizell on time. I can trust him to, you know, find Boardingham over the middle for 5 yards. Um, and even a little thing like that probably gives Florida, I mean, it definitely gives Florida a much better chance to win this game, but I mean, we'll see. I mean, the good news is that the DJ injury does not seem as bad as initially thought. You know, he was carted off the field and it felt like the season was just kind of over right then and there, but um he hasn't been ruled out for Texas yet. I imagine he probably will be. Um, but I think he can likely come back for Ole Miss and LSU and FSU finish out the season. Um, I guess my thing. Or actually, do you have any thoughts? Do you want to talk about DJ possibly coming back for even Texas, but probably the other three games of the year?
Yeah, so the way I took that news, I'm going to assume until further notice, he's going to miss Texas and be able to play the rest of the season. We'll obviously see with updates later this week into next week what happens. That's how I'm going to treat it. And that changes everything. I mean, you didn't expect to really beat Georgia or Texas, even in a good season. Even if Florida had played well all year, you wouldn't have expected that. Um, but if you have him back for especially those home games against LSU and Ole Miss, like if you win those, that changes everything. You know what I mean? And you can't win those without DJ. So having the opportunity to compete in those games and maybe win those games matters a whole lot, in my opinion. I mean, I'm sure we'll have some Billy talk in here at some point. Like they have to win those. You know what I mean? To have that conversation. And you can't do that without DJ. So having that as an opportunity and having that in the cards is just so huge, and it just makes you more excited about the rest of the season,
Oh yeah.
frankly. Like it's not going to be fun to watch, Aiden Warner or Clay Millen or like, I mean, it's the third string quarterback, man. Like, what do you expect? What can you realistically expect? You know what I mean? So, yeah, having him back sometime this year would be really, really, really huge.
Yeah, and I don't want to dwell on this too long because I think regardless of whoever it is, Clay Millen, Aiden Warner, Parker Leash, me, whoever you throw out there, you're only going to get so much, especially if it's just going to be the Texas game. I mean, even if it was DJ out there, they still probably don't win that game because Texas is, they're Texas. But I do want to just talk a little bit about um can we see Clay Millen? I mean I again I don't want to I'm not expecting the world out of the third string quarterback. I don't think they're gonna beat I don't think they beat Georgia if Clay Millen comes to that game instead of Aiden Warner. I don't know if they beat Texas if it's Clay Millen over Aiden Warner. But like he played like real games for them as a redshirt freshman for Colorado State. Like he threw 10 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He set the single season completion percentage record at 72.2, set the NCAA record for an FBS freshman, and was the second best mark in Mountain West history for completion percentage. Like, and then this is kind of unrelated. I was scrolling through TikTok last night, and you ever see those videos that are like they're like the slideshows and they're like where the 2020 class of quarterbacks landed or whatever. I saw one. It was the 2021 QB class. And Clay Millen was a 4-star. Like he was the 21st ranked quarterback in his class. And so like again, I don't say all this to be like, oh, he's gonna come in and they're gonna beat Texas or like he's gonna look great, but like I'm curious how bad he looks in practice for Billy to lean on Aiden Warner, a walk-on who transferred from Yale.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there's a reason Warner's third string, right? I mean, we don't see practice. I'm sure there is a reason, but I think to your point, even if Warner is a better practice player and like he deserves that third string spot, I think there's something to be said to having actually played real college football games before. And even playing in the Mountain West of Colorado State, that is real Division I experience. Um, Aiden Warner, I don't know, did he play at Yale? I'm gonna look it up
I'm not sure.
because
I just
like
know he went there.
because he's a redshirt freshman, so I don't even know if he didn't play a single game before this year. His first ever appearance in a meaningful snap was against Georgia. You know what I mean? And like all due respect to my Winter Park High School legend, shout out Go Cats, right? Um, like he just hasn't played college football before. That's an impossible situation to be thrown in. Like you want him to go on the road to a top five team in the country on his first ever meaningful game. Like that's crazy. I think Clay Millen makes a lot of sense, even if Warner is a better player, or potentially better long term, you know, better in practice. Having a guy who's played games before, I think gives you something resembling a chance. Um, I mean, you're going to lean on the ground game anyway you do, anyway you slice it, right? So I think I'm with you wholeheartedly that I would like to see them throw him out there just because he's got a little bit of experience, and I think you need that even just to manage a big loss or something. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Like he could be real. Maybe he is really bad. Like obviously Aiden Warner's the third string for a reason. Billy's seeing these practices and stuff, but I mean, and he could go out there against Texas and be like 0 for 5 with 5 picks, and we'd be totally wrong. But I just don't like the reason you bring him is so you have a like high floor, low ceiling backup quarterback with like actual college football experience. Like in a way, it almost felt like this would have been the guy over DJ just because like okay, Graham goes down, you have Clay Millen who's like Graham Mertz light and he has college football experience and he knows how to run a Division 1 like FBS college football like offense. And so I don't understand why he's just here to get a degree from the University of Florida, basically, is what it feels like. Um, but again, I mean, what do I know? I'm not the one saying these practices. I don't know how Clay Millen's looking versus Aiden Warner. I just feel like if you're gonna go with the third string quarterback, I mean, if you have to go with the third string quarterback because of these injuries, like I'd go with the guy who's played snaps at this level. Um, because it's like, and to your point about like long term, because you know Clay Millen is older than an Aiden Warner, who's a redshirt freshman. Like in theory, like DJ is going to be your guy from here on out till he either graduates or declares for the draft. And I like know Kyle Trask was like a no-name recruit, and then he turned into a Heisman finalist. But like Kyle Trask was like big, and like he was playing at like a legit high school. Like the only reason he didn't start is because the what's his Derek King was there too, who was also like a legit, high school prospect. And like there was something there. Whereas like Aiden Warner is like he's kind of small. Like he doesn't really have an attribute or a trait that necessarily shows you that like he could be a Kyle Trask where you're developing him and all of a sudden he goes from walk on to like really good SEC quarterback. Um, so like I don't understand why you'd play the younger guy as like a develop thing. Because either way, like you would hope that if DJ doesn't end up being the answer, you bring in somebody else, whether through the portal or a high level recruit, to be the like the next guy. So I don't know. I don't want to dwell on this too long because again, it's a third string quarterback. You could roll me out there and you'd probably have the same exact result of whatever is going to happen on Saturday. Um, not quite. But I don't know. Any more thoughts on that? Topher in the third string quarterback situation.
No, not really. And again, I don't want to harp on it in a negative way too much. Like I'm sure he is a talented player. I'm sure he is a good kid. It's just like he's a redshirt freshman walk on. You know what I mean? He's not ready for prime time. Like even if he becomes like a good college football player that starts at a good program, he's not that right now. You know what I mean? Um, so I would like to just see someone with a little more experience, just because I want to feel like Florida has a fighting chance, even if it's delusional. And yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, DJ's healthy for the last 3 games of the season, and we can really have some decision time and kind of crunch time moments down the stretch.
Yeah. And so I guess that leaves us just talking about Billy Napier and sort of just his future. But real quick before we talk about that, I do want to bring something up like super unrelated, like not talk about just a quick note. They announced the broadcast crew for the LSU game, or not the broadcast crew, but just where it will be broadcast. And how in the like to people who say Florida's not like a blue blood brand, just from like a brand standpoint, I think this season's proven them wrong because like they're not very good at football. They're 4-4. They're probably gonna be 4-5 after this week. They're gonna be on ABC again. Like
3 weeks in a row.
how in the world did the Gators keep getting on ABC? Because like Texas is gonna be on ABC, right? And then LSU, Georgia, Miami, Texas A&M. Like they've played majority of their season on ABC.
Dude, half their schedule's been on network television. That's insane.
Like
That's like Notre Dame territory.
it's nuts to me. I mean, I'm happy for it because again, it's good for the brand, but it's also just like what what's going on here to get this going? It's so funny to me. But that's all I gotta say about that. I just thought that was funny. I wanted to throw that in there before I forgot. Um, but segueing to not so fun topic, Billy Napier. Um, I mean, I don't know. Like a moral victory is great, but like he really doesn't need moral victories right now. Like he needs concrete, tangible wins, and you're probably not going to win this Texas game. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying. Like you're going to be in a position where you're 4-5, and hopefully you get DJ back to close out the year with the last three games. But it's going to be tough to find two more wins to get bowl eligibility. So Topher, just your initial thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of at a point where it's almost like a worst case scenario to make an evaluation on Billy Napier. Um, because like if you'd fired him after A&M, right? Nobody would have objected. It's just like, yeah, he's terrible. There's no hoper, right? But post bye week, everything has been so undeniably positive. A couple of nice wins, some good performances, but it's not definitively corner turned, we're back. If they beat Tennessee, they beat Georgia, okay, maybe that's different, but it's not quite there. It's better. It's very close. It's not quite there. So you can't definitively say he needs to stay, but it's hard to say we need to fire him because there's all these great young players that he brought into the program while playing well. And now you don't have a quarterback the last 4 games of the season potentially. So it's going to be even harder to make a definitive judgment on Napier's tenure. I think I'm still team outside hire. Um, but I mean, everything on the field and organizationally has been so much better. It was so much better against Georgia. It's been so much better like across the board. Like that can't mean nothing. I think we're foolish if we say that means nothing. And I really wish they had a good recruiting class because I think if they had a good recruiting class, this it's a pretty easy keep if they make a bowl game.
Yeah, I think, and that's really the biggest thing. I mean, I've talked about it a lot. I mean, the recruiting class is just not good. It's a pretty bad class. They had, a guy who's visiting Notre Dame coming up who was a key guy, and then they had this dude who they had committed. He was a four-star defensive lineman who had like just started playing high school football, and he was just kind of like a freak athlete. And it was kind of this, diamond in the rough for a four-star, but like it is a diamond in the rough when you find a guy who had like just started playing football and they're just like already a freak athlete. And he decommitted, and like I think he's from Georgia, so like probably a Georgia commit. We'll see. Um, but it's just like you keep losing guys left and right, and we keep saying like Florida is a place that kind of recruits itself if you win, but they're just not winning. And like they've played really well, and there is some proof of concept in these games, but I think the most defining thing of this Billy Napier era is just like a era of almost, like you go into year two and I guess I'm gonna start year one. Like you go into year one and you almost have a great finish of the year, and then you flub it against Vandy, you blow it in the third quarter against FSU, and then you have just an absolute no show in the bowl game. You get into year two and it's 5-2 looking great, and then you almost beat Arkansas, you almost beat Missouri, you almost beat FSU, and then you don't make a bowl game. And then you get into year three, and we're doing the same thing where like they're looking pretty good now. Like they've looked a lot better. The defense looks good, but then it's like you almost beat Tennessee and you almost beat Georgia. And as like positive as they've looked just growth wise and looking better, it's just still the same. The almost keep just stacking up, and he's got a lot of young guys on this roster now. But it's like in this era of the portal, like there's no guarantee that a lot of them stay, even though they seem very bought in and committed to what he's doing. And he's not doing the thing where, regardless of the guys you have on the roster now, whether you like them or not, you have to continually just keep bringing in this like elite level of roster through the recruiting class every year. And it's just not there. Like I genuinely don't know what happened where like the transition class was like okay, it was pretty good. The 24 class, kind of fell apart at the end, but still had a lot of nice pieces. And then this year, just like it would be one thing if it was just a bunch of three stars, but it's like there's just not even like guys there. There's like eight players. It's like me in Dynasty when I just want to play the games and I like gave up on recruiting. I
No,
don't I don't get it.
it's it's crazy for that exact reason. I mean, I think to your point of what ifs, I mean that's hell, that's kind of on the recruiting trail, right? I mean, think about the high profile players that are like what ifs in the Napier era, like Jeremiah Smith, like Harold Perkins, like all these guys that Florida was in for, some more real than others, but that's a what if. I mean, last year's recruiting class was what if they hold on to those guys and they finish in the top three recruiting classes,
I mean,
right?
yeah, like Xavier Filsaime and some of those other guys. I mean, pretty much a lot of the Miami guys who are really good now, like Mark Fletcher has been incredible for Miami, and he
Yeah,
was a Florida guy almost.
their left tackle, Akinola, he was a almost Florida guy. I
And
mean,
one of
it's
their
a
best edge guys, Francis Magoa.
exactly, man. Like so many, so many what ifs on the field, so many what ifs off the field. And then I think to your point about this year's recruiting class, that is really what it is, and that's what worries me. I mean, Florida still has appeal to some top level guys, and like obviously they'd have appeal if they were winning more games to a lot of guys, but they're just it kind of looks like they're just not doing the work. And I don't know if that's a they think they're fired, it's a pre-fired situation or what, but like they just don't, there's just not people. There's no bodies. They're gonna need to have sign like a 20-man transfer class just to fill out the roster. You know what I mean? So that's scary because I don't even need a great recruit. I think if you look at the life cycle of this team, you can afford a slightly down class right now because of the amount of good freshmen and sophomores on the roster currently. Like you can have a slightly below par like full signing class and be able to survive if the 27 class is strong. There just isn't people, bro. They
Yeah,
don't have a
like
roster.
that's like, and I think it all like this game was the biggest indication of why that was an issue. Like half their roster feels like it goes down, and they're playing Aiden Warner at quarterback. They're playing Derek Wingo at linebacker. Cormani, as much as we raved about him and like want to see more of him, like he was like a fifth string corner, and now he's like corner one essentially. At least it was like playing corner one at the end of that game, like him and Trick Wesley Bridges. Um, like you just run out of guys, and if you don't bring in the recruiting class, like what happens if that happens again? Like you're just really banking on all of your good players to just not get hurt. And in a sport like football, like that just doesn't happen because it is a very violent, like physical sport and like guys are just bound to get hurt. And so like you just have to have like the depth, like top to bottom.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing. I mean, what is the defining roster trait of the Saban Alabama teams, Kirby Georgia teams, even the Dabo Clemson teams that won national championships in a lot of ways, is that they have depth. Especially Saban, that was his big thing, is that, a guy goes down and you have a five-star to fill that spot, you know what I mean? Um, And that's why building year over year, cycle after cycle, that's why that stuff matters, is to build depth, to build institutional continuity. Um, and it kind of seems like they've given up on that, I guess. It's just really weird. It's a really weird situation. Like they're not bad recruiters, they've brought in enough good players that we know they're not bad recruiters. So it's just weird, and nothing else really about it.
Yeah, it's really puzzling to me. Like it would be one thing if they just weren't bringing in elite guys and it was still like a decent class. Um, but there's just no one. I mean, like we harked so much on Dan Mullen for like not being a good recruiter. Like, and he wasn't. He was not a very good recruiter. He didn't care too much about recruiting. But like if you look at the class rankings for Dan Mullen, like he had a top 20, top 25 class like every year. Like Florida feels like a program where if you're like really about it and like a true psycho, like you can consistently bring in a top 10, top five class every year. And if you don't care, like if you're a Dan Mullen and you just don't really care, you can kind of just sleepwalk your way to a top 20 class, like within that 15 to 20 range. And because I've literally seen it with like Dan Mullen and McElwain during that little stretch where it was just felt like recruiting fell off, and it was like, man, we suck. We only brought in the 16th ranked national class in the country. Um, and this is just like, what's going on? Like, is there like this little faith that Billy's gonna stay? Like, does he just like you said, like, is this just a pre-fired situation? I don't really get it. And I think for that reason, despite all the positive we've seen the past few weeks, I too am team outside hire just because it does feel like this program as a whole just needs a bolt, like a jump start with some fresh juice.
Yeah, and that's especially if this season ends the way we see it very well might. If um they lose to Ole Miss and LSU and Texas, they finish 5-7. God forbid they lose to terrible Florida State and finish 4-8. Um, it's just gonna be so hard to keep any kind of momentum. And even if like I think we can both admit this coaching staff has done a lot of really great stuff this season. They've done a lot of really good stuff developing the guys they have brought in. I mean, you're just gonna be so far behind the eight ball, um, in that situation. It's just gonna be really tough. It's gonna be really tricky to build back into anything close to what we want Florida to be.
And I mean that's the thing. It kind of feels like, with the World Series just ending, to use a little baseball comp of the Yankees and Dodgers, like say the season finishes 7-5. Let's say they lose to Texas, they beat LSU, um, or I guess we'll say 6-6, 7-6 with the bowl game. Let's say they'll beat LSU and FSU, win their bowl game. 7-6, and you have a lot of promise with like DJ and like Mizell and Trey Wilson, and then like some guys on the defense. And it's like, wow, like maybe they could be something. But then you don't bring in a good recruiting class. So you don't really have that depth that you really need to compete at the SEC level. And you deal with those injuries again. And you have a lot of guys who are key players on this team that are going to graduate and leave. And it feels like the Yankees, where it's like, yeah, they have Soto and yeah, they have Judge and yeah, they have Stan, but like, oh man, you get to the six hole and you have Verdugo and Austin Wells. Yikes. Whereas like you want to be like the Dodgers, where it's like, wow, I just got through the top three of the order, like three MVPs, and now it's like, well, shit, man. Now I got to pitch to Teoscar Hernandez. And it's like you get to the bottom of the order, you're like, well, shit, man. I got Lux and Muncy, the guys who are just gonna grind out a walk. Like I gotta throw 10 pitches to this dude who's batting 140 just because he grinds out every at bat. Like that's ridiculous. And with them, it does feel like kind of like a stars and scrubs situation with the talent they bring in to build in the depth compared to the top guys that we like. But I don't know. We will see. So, I mean, that's pretty much everything I want to say about the Gators. I think both of our teams had a bye week this week, Cal and Notre Dame. Um, Shout out Nebraska though. They're
In crisis.
I'm rocking a hat with both teams that lost this week, and that's crazy. Um, Yeah, tough scenes for Nebraska. I cannot believe they lost to UCLA. Dylan Raiola also talk about freshman quarterbacks getting injured. He also got hurt, but his back injury seems to be uh, not as severe as once thought. So similar to the DJ thing with his leg. So that's good. And we'll see. They play number five, six. What's Texas's ranking?
I I mean, we'll see. Tuesday's the CFP rankings. I guess
Oh
that's all we
yeah,
need to worry about, right?
yeah, exactly. Anything else happening Tuesday? Anything else important happening this week?
I don't think
Besides
so.
the expanded rankings? Yeah, I don't know, nothing. This is
Not to
being
my knowledge.
recorded Monday, November 4th. Nothing I could think of significant on the 5th besides the expanded CFP rankings. We'll see. Um, but yeah, so we will see Tuesday or I guess Saturday against Texas. Maybe DJ will play. Maybe we'll get our wish and Clay Millen will get his first start as a Gator. Or maybe they'll roll out Warner again. But we will see. Thank you guys for listening to another episode. And peace.